The Browns are telling you already that 2025 is just a formality. I'll explain coming up next in the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer Sherman, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Just check Jimmy Haslam's flight logs, and you'll see a team that's ready to draft another quarterback next spring. Speaking of the quarterbacks, Joe Flacco may play more games than any of us are anticipating, and still no word on Quinshon Judkins, which, what does that mean for the Browns run game heading into week one? I do want to thank you for being on every day at the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Unsurprisingly, the Browns brass, including Jimmy Haslam, Andrew Berry, and Kevin Stefanski, were all at the Shoe in Columbus to take in Ohio State, Texas on Saturday over the weekend. And there was pictures of at least Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry on the sideline. Kevin Stefanski actually talked on Monday about the fact that he was down there. And for him specifically, it's interesting because this isn't something that he, even to his own admission, has shared he hasn't really had a chance to do throughout his time as head coach of the Cleveland Browns. He literally flat out said that he hasn't had a chance to go to like big time football games like that while he's been a head coach. And it helps that it's in Columbus and it's only 2 hours down the road. But what I found interesting about that is like this all goes back to this past offseason rather, when Kevin talked about how he was going to be more involved in the quarterback search than ever before and have it take a more hands-on approach to that. That wasn't something that he had ever done. And so here he is now as we start already looking ahead to 2026, and we're scouting these quarterbacks each and every single weekend for who the Browns could potentially take with their 2 first-round draft picks that they have. Here he is again, being pretty involved in this process, actually making a point to get down to a big-time college football game on a Saturday before his team played, with his team not playing, obviously, this weekend, and he made the most of it. He went down and did that. I now kind of wonder if he's going to do the same thing November 1st when Ohio State hosts Penn State Halloween weekend, because the Browns are on their bye that week. So it's all very interesting. And what also was interesting is the fact that after that game, Jimmy Haslam, I don't know if Andrew Berry went on this trip, but Jimmy Haslam then flew to Clemson and was present for the Clemson LSU game and took in that game as well, where you had 2 other high-profile quarterbacks in Cade Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier, and obviously the draw of the Texas-Ohio State game on top of a number of players, because Caleb Downs is probably one of the best players in all of college football, if not the best. And Texas has a bunch of other guys on their roster that are top 10 players in the sport. But obviously, Arch Manning was the big ticket item in that game. And if he was to come out next year, they were obviously down there to at least get a look at him as well and see how he looked in his debut. Wasn't a great start, but he got to take in 2 more high-profile quarterbacks in Klubnik and Nussmeier in that LSU game when he made the trip down there for that game. And I don't recall, same way we can't, Kevin Stefanski admitted he hadn't really been doing this in the past, going to these big-time college football games and scouting in real time and watching the quarterbacks and all these different things. I don't recall Jimmy Haslam doing that in the past either. Like making a point to, on a Saturday, go down to a one big game and then fly to another big game. Like maybe he would do it to go to a Tennessee game because we know he's a big Tennessee booster. He went to Tennessee. He supports the program very much there fiscally. And so he loves to be around that program. But I don't know that I can recall a time, even like back when Johnny Manziel was coming out, even back when Brady Quinn was coming. Like I don't remember a time when he was going down and going out of his way to make these trips to see these quarterbacks in person with some of the scouts and bigger names in the Browns front office to really get a read on these guys and evaluate these guys and all those different things. And also to do 2 trips in one day, 2 big games like that in one day that just so happened to be games with some of the top names at the quarterback position. I don't find that to be a coincidence. And so all this to say, it seems pretty obvious at this juncture that the Browns are going to be closely monitoring these quarterbacks all year long, that they are setting themselves up to at least have in the back of their mind the idea that taking a quarterback is maybe the top priority for this team, and how that affects the current state of the quarterback room and the two rookies that they have on it remains to be seen. I've been sort of the belief that this was going to be the case anyway, but it does kind of like as week one continues here and we get closer and closer to kickoff of a new season, it does kind of feel like we're in a place where they're treating 2025 as what many of us feel it's going to be, sort of a formality, and that they're trying to get through this year. And really the end goal here is to get to 2026 and know that you have the rights to potentially draft one of these big ticket quarterbacks that's going to be coming out. And this isn't going to be the end of this. There's other quarterbacks I'm sure they will be scouting throughout the season. Sam Levitt at Arizona State, who I really like. Lenore Sellers at some point probably comes up on their radar and is a guy that they go watch in some capacity. If they weren't there in Atlanta watching him this weekend, I don't recall anybody saying or reporting that Jimmy Haslam was at that game, but I would guess that would be another guy that they would have their eyes on. And there's others as well. There are other players that are certainly going to be worth monitoring if you're a fan of the Browns, and that the Browns will certainly be monitoring with their scouting department and their personnel department. And seems like Jimmy Haslam wants to be involved in this process as well. And I guess rightfully so. It is his football team, and this is going to be a big decision regarding the future of this franchise. But I just found it interesting that on a weekend where there was no NFL yet, week one wasn't quite here. It was all about college football. You had college football basically wall to wall, like Thursday night through Sunday. And then you even had the grand finale of Bill Belichick's first game in college, which did not go well on Monday night. So from like Thursday through Monday, it was all college football all the time. And now you get to week one, and that before the season even starts, you're already seeing the tea leaves of this Browns organization and this Browns franchise showing up at games where a lot of these high profile quarterbacks are involved. So that's not to say that they're not going to like try to win this season or anything like that. I don't want to poo-poo on the parade here of Browns fans who are excited about a new season beginning, the opportunities that come with that, and that maybe Joe Flacco can rekindle something from 2023 and make this a fun, memorable season. After all, I can respect all that. I want this to be an enjoyable experience. I want to have a good team and a fun team to talk about with you on this platform, on this podcast. But I did think it was interesting that in the opening, the big opening, the real opening week, if you will, of college football, because week zero is week zero, it's fun, but this is the week that, is the real premiere. Week zero is like an undercard. This is the main event, week one of the college football season. We have plenty of big games to sort of headline this grand weekend of college football. I found it interesting that you're already seeing the Browns pop up at some of these key games where big-time quarterbacks are involved, so that they can get a sense of like who they like and who they don't. And this all sort of falls in line with what Andrew Berry said back at the draft this year, that they're always scouting these guys 2 years out, and so they already have a decent read on some of these guys anyway. But now the real evaluation and the real deep dive into who these guys are, how they fit if they were to draft them with the Cleveland Browns, all those things come into play. And it's going to be wild to follow along with all season long to see where they're popping up at games. And I just think it gives you it starts to give us a sense of where their heads are at looking ahead to 2026. And that, not that this year is going to be a waste, but that this year is kind of to set the stage for whatever potential quarterback they're taking next spring. And I know it's going to be hard for some people to hear because some people want to see what these two rookies have, but it might not play out that way depending on what their plans are. And they're already looking at these quarterbacks and looking ahead to what's to come in the class of 2026. And it's not a surprise, but it is something to remember about while this season's going on, where their heads are kind of at with this thing and where their heads are at with the future of this franchise. They're already kind of on to 2026 in that way. And so we'll continue to see them pop up, and we'll continue to monitor with you throughout the season. But I thought that was an interesting sort of observation that Jimmy Haslam's making the rounds on a Saturday to multiple games where these big quarterbacks are playing. Everyone wants to know how many games Joe Flacco will play this season, and it may be more than even I thought initially. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is just around the corner. You can feel the buzz, and fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. If you haven't joined a league yet, now is the time, and it's all happening at Yahoo Fantasy. I am playing Yahoo Fantasy. My most competitive league is in Yahoo Fantasy. You should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran creating your millionth league. With the season set to kick off this Thursday, September 4th, now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many fun ways to compete. You want more ways to play? Try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's just one team left standing. Want to play instantly with friends? Try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Get your crew together, go head-to-head in a private league, or if you don't have a crew, no problem. Just join a public league. It is Yahoo's easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off September 4th, so do not wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, so speaking of the quarterback position, the Browns might be looking ahead to 2026, but they obviously have a 2025 season to get through, and they want Joe Flacco to be the guy that is under center for at least the start of that, if not the majority of this upcoming season. And so we'll get our first look at Joe 2 years removed from the magical season, the magical end of the season in 2023. See what he sort of brings to the table here, see what he can sort of offer this Browns team, and, you know, where the team kind of heads under his direction early on in the season. But what I think is interesting is, and I've talked about it already, how long of a leash Joe Flacco gets to start this year. And I think this is a very interesting and fascinating conversation, because as much as I sat there and said, and I do in my heart of hearts think, like, give him the first 6 games and then reevaluate, because that first 6 game stretch is the stretch that we're all continuing to talk about being, you know, the toughest games, the stretch of the season where you play some of your toughest opponents. 5 of the 6 teams you play in those first 6 games, as we know, are playoff teams from a year ago. So we're anticipating that they're going to be pretty good, even though that might not totally be the case, and we'll see. But I actually think Flacco's leash might extend beyond that. And part of this too is just about like how they navigate that opening stretch. If they're 0-6, then yeah, of course, which by the way, I'm not predicting, because I just said yesterday I think the Browns are going to beat the Bengals on Sunday. But if they're 0-6 to start the year, you can make the case that it could be time to make a switch at that point. Like, all right, we got to try to do something different here. If Joe Flacco just doesn't look right and the offense isn't really if the offense looks like last year, you almost have to make a switch. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be more consistent than last year. I think it's going to be an average at least offense, and that's good news for the Browns, because I think if you're an average offense, you can be a lot more competitive in these games than you were a season ago. But if things look really bad, you're 0-6, yeah, you can certainly make a change at that point. But let's just say, for argument's sake, they come out of that opening stretch and they're 2-4. Let's say they beat the Bengals like I predicted, and maybe they beat like the Vikings. Maybe JJ McCarthy just ain't it, and they beat the Vikings in week 5, and then they come out of that first 6 games and they're 2-4. Then you get the Dolphins, who I think are going to be a train wreck this year. Then you get the Patriots. Those are 2 teams that are sort of in weird spots, not really the best of the best. Like, those are winnable games for the Browns, I would say. And then you could be setting yourself up to potentially be 500 or around 500, 3-5, maybe 4-4 by the time the bye week rolls around, week 9. And that's kind of the place where we've said maybe the bye week makes the most sense to make a change at quarterback, because you can set the stage for getting a rookie prepared. Dylan Gabriel would be first up, getting a rookie prepared over the course of 2 weeks to start against the Jets in week 10. And then you kind of let him play out a stretch of games and see how it kind of goes from there. The other thing too, though, is like, if you're like 500, if you're a 500 team after going into the bye, you can't pull the plug on Joe Flacco. Or if you're around 500, you can't pull the plug on Joe Flacco unless he looks so putridly bad that you just have to. Because again, the thing the Browns are trying to balance here is keeping people bought in throughout the season, keeping these veterans feeling like there's something left to play for. And if you're around 500 at the bye week, I would guess that most of this roster, most of this locker room is going to feel pretty good about their standing going into that week 9 bye. And then like, okay, we got the second half of the season essentially to see what we can do with the rest of the schedule to try to be in playoff contention and maybe sneak into the playoffs or something. If they have a puncher's chance, if they're within reach of the playoffs or a wild card spot, they're not going to pull the plug on Flacco even going into that bye week. But I actually think so that could extend how long he plays. I still don't think he gets through a 17-game season. I just think that's far-fetched for somebody, for Flacco just in general, but also being 40 years old, I don't know that that's in the cards for him. But the idea that like we're only going to get Flacco for like a handful of games at the start of the season, I think is a little far-fetched at this juncture. I think the plan here is going to be, let's see how these first 6 games go. And if he comes out of that and they're okay, they're still afloat and they're not like over, then you can make the case that he should keep that job for a little while longer. And then that could extend even deeper into the season, which then prolongs when you actually get to see these rookies. Once they got rid of Kenny Pickett, once they traded Kenny Pickett, I think that made the runway for Flacco even longer because they want to see at least Dylan Gabriel this season, I would imagine. I want to see Shedeur Sanders. I want to see both rookies. I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't play them. I've made that point very, very clear this off season. But in their eyes, if it goes Flacco to Gabriel, like I think they'd like to see Gabriel for a stretch of games first to get a sense of like, were they right about the pick? Is he the guy they thought he was? They clearly thought he was the better of the two because they drafted him in the 3rd round. And so he's going to get the priority here. And I'm curious to see like how that all sort of plays out once we get to that stage. But that stage might not come until later on in the season because just depending on where the team is at, depending on what their record is, depending on how Flacco looks, it might be the bye week or later, depending on where things stand at that juncture. I almost kind of feel like too, it kind of makes sense to evaluate a Flacco, maybe at least from a fan standpoint, in like 4-game chunks this season. So like Bengals, Ravens, Packers, Lions, where are the Browns at? If they're 1-3, okay, it's not a great start, but you can validate, okay, let's see how the next couple games go. And then you get Vikings, Steelers, Dolphins, Patriots, like I said before the bye week. And then you're halfway through the season, essentially. You had 2 quarters of the season knocked out. And that's where you can really sort of assess going to the bye, hey, here's where we're at. And that's kind of where I think it makes it where the evaluation process will sort of happen for Flacco. So I don't know. I've been talking so much about the quarterback stuff. Obviously, everybody wants to go through the schedule and just pick a part of it, point to a part of it and say, this is where they should make a quarterback change. That's easy to do from the outside looking in. That's easy to do like as a projection thing and a guess in a fun exercise as we think about what lies ahead in 2025 this season. But in retrospect and in actuality, it is not nearly that simple. There's going to be a lot of factors that come into play. And if the team is still afloat and the team is still in the mix, hovering around 500 or whatever else, you're going to have a hard time convincing that locker room that it's time to then pivot to a rookie when they know Joe Flacco is a veteran in this league who's done it at a high level and has won a Super Bowl and all those different things. And some of these guys have even seen him do it here in Cleveland. So I think we need to prepare ourselves for a situation where Flacco plays longer than maybe we anticipated. And that likely means he's playing at least until week 9 when the bye week hits. And then we maybe get the change or the switch to the rookies. And I think it's actually a fun conversation to have later on this week about how much of the rookies we're going to get to see play and whether or not we're actually going to get to see both of them, which I think would be the Browns doing themselves a disservice if they don't play both rookies. But there's a scenario in which I think that could play out where they only play one, and we'll talk about that later this week. But in the meantime, week 1 is here. Quinshon Judkins is not. What does it mean for the Browns' run game in support of Joe Flacco? We'll talk about that coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. We have an important request here at Locked On. We want to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thank you for helping us out. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your first bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Here's why I can't get enough of FanDuel. First off, they have options for any style of betting, whether you just want to ride money lines, play the spread, maybe even against your favorite team if you're worried they're going to lose, but they'll at least cover. I feel like a lot of Browns fans can play that card this year with given how their season's expected to go. Or you can piece together player props that have stakes in several games. And that's the other thing. When you're betting with FanDuel, it makes every game feel more exciting and meaningful, even if it's not watching or cheering for your team. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Hey, Locked On Browns fans, are you paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying gas that you already needed anyway. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. People are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card from Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited time 25% per gallon bonus. That's promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. All right, so as I said, week one is obviously here. We know that. But Quinshon Judkins not in the building as the Browns prepare for the Bengals this week. And one thing I've continually heard people bring up, especially as they look ahead to this matchup with Cincinnati, is the idea that, well, hey, how are the Browns going to run the football? And I do agree. We saw a lackluster, I think, run game during the preseason and training camp this year. I think that last preseason game, you sort of saw it come to life when the ones actually got a chance to play in a game. But context, of course, they were playing against the third and fourth string Rams defense there. Like the Rams basically cut all but 6 guys that made their roster from that made that trip to Cleveland for that preseason finale a couple weeks back. I'm not really putting a lot of stock in the Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson gashing that group of guys per se. But here's what I'll say about the run game, because I do think not having Quinshon Judkins rightfully is a major blow to this team. I think the run game can be fine so long as the offensive line stays healthy. I'll get into that here in a second. I think Quinshon's presence, whenever that is a thing, because I don't know when he's going to be here. We still don't have full clarity on the situation, when his contract situation is going to get resolved. Is he going to get suspended by the league? Seems like the Browns are still sort of waiting for a resolution from the NFL before anything sort of happens here, so we'll see. But once they get him, I think he takes the run game to another level. Like top 10 in football even is where I would project it. And that's partially because I love Quinshon Judkins. It's partially because you're going back to Kevin Stefanski's offense. And the run game is going to be an important factor and piece of that to have success as a whole for that group. And so I think when he's there, when he's back, I have a lot of confidence in this run game and sort of the different roles that guys are going to play. Sampson coming in as like your third down guy, while Quinshon's your first and second down guy, getting the tough yards and really just like being physical. I think for a handful of weeks, though, while he's potentially not out there, because even if he comes back at this point, it's unlikely he plays week one. Even if he does play week one, it'll probably just be like in spurts, like a few plays here or there. So if it's week 1, week 2 that he would miss, and then he maybe be ready for like week 3, 4, and that's assuming he'd come back this week. I think in the meantime, this group can figure it out, if you will. so long as this veteran offensive line is leading the way. And that's where I think their health comes into play. We hear all the time, it's one of the most cliche things in football, that winning and losing, success in football, whatever you want to say, starts with the defensive line and the offensive line. It starts in the trenches. Browns defensive line, we already know is going to be dominant. This offensive line, while taking a step back in a major way last year, I think has a chance to, I don't necessarily want to say, because they all are a year older, there's injuries that come into play, all those things, but they are a veteran group that has had success at a high level, and I think they can get back to being a strong unit and, have help this offense have success just by nature of doing the things that they do well and that they succeeded in prior to switching the offense up for Deshaun Watson. That unit was elite. They were one of the best in football. Not saying they will get back to that. Not saying they're going to be like top 5 or anything, but if they can be like top 10, fringe top 10 as a unit, I think that's pretty good. And I think the run game success is going to start with that group, no matter really who's out there running the football. It helps when you have a player like Quinshon. Quinshon's the type of guy that can erase mistakes. Like if a guy misses a tackle, he can make a guy miss in the backfield or run him over or whatever and make a play out of nothing. But while he's not there, I still think this group can open up the holes necessary to help guys like Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson have success. It might not be the best run game, and it might not even be the strength of this team for a couple weeks. And there is the old adage of like, even when people think that you need a good run game for play action to work. Play action works regardless of if your run game is immensely dominant or not. And that's just evident through tape and things that are going on. Guys know their assignments. They bite on the run sometimes. Like it still is an effective way to run an offense, but it helps when it's more successful. And so I think they can be fine enough to hold their own for a few weeks if Quinshon's going to be out for just a few weeks. Now, if he's going to be out the whole season, it's a different story. You want that talent back there eventually. But as long as this offensive line is healthy, which at this point I wouldn't be, if you have your doubts, if you're somebody who is worried about that and thinks, can Jack Conklin stay healthy? Can Joe Bitonio, as he's gotten older, stay healthy? Can Wyatt Teller, who's gotten banged up a couple times these last couple years, stay healthy? Ethan Posick, who's starting the season a little banged up after the injury in the final preseason game. Like, it's a big if, probably. It's maybe a big ask for that group. But if they're healthy, I think they can still be an effective run game. Just maybe not as don't think like Nick Chubb dominance. Just think like, okay, 2023, they were okay. They were good, not great. They did some nice things, but Jerome Ford showed you something while filling in for Nick Chubb. And they still had a productive offense. That if that's kind of what they have to be for a few weeks, I think that's fine. But you want Quinshon Judkins out there to make that more of like the bread and butter, the identity of your offense in the long term. But we just don't know when he's going to be there. So and especially, here's the other thing, and I talked about this yesterday, especially going up against a Bengals defense that was given up. I mean, they were getting gashed in the preseason against the Eagles backups. Like, if this is the chance, this could be a chance to get off on the right foot with the run game and have a lot of success with that phase of the offense specifically, because the Bengals seem susceptible to giving up big plays, both in the run and the pass game, but certainly in the run game based on what we saw in the preseason. And if that's the case, like, yeah, this could be a momentum builder type of game for that group in the backfield and get things sort of trending in the right direction for this tough stretch of 6 games that we've obviously harped on and talked about so much. So we'll see. But I think it does start more so with the offensive line for this group to be, for the run game to be successful. Quinshon, when he gets there, will be helpful, but I think they can be okay. And then we'll see what type of level they can reach once they have their top back in there. But going back to Kevin Stefanski's offense, getting back to what made this offensive line great and the practices and tendencies. Mike Bloomgren is obviously a guy who comes from the Bill Callahan tree, and he's more tough-nosed. He's coaching them the way that they were coached before, which worked a lot better. He's teaching them the same techniques and things that made them successful under Bill Callahan. That's just all important to the success of this offense as a whole, but also the run game. And I think they can figure it out in the meantime to the best of their ability. Maybe not every week, but a team like the Bengals, I think, is the perfect storm for them to, get off on the right foot as a group and get that run game some momentum moving forward. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. If you liked what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel for your second listen. Check out Locked On Fantasy Football with Vinny Lyer, Michelle Madjuk. They'll prep you for your fantasy draft so you can become the most informed manager in your league. Or as always, you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being on every day at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See you.